For the Country Viewpoint program, it's good to catch up again with Matt Dalgleish from episode 3. Your new venture with Andrew Whitelaw, Matt. Was it settled the name over a couple of Guinnesses, I'm wondering?
It actually took a little bit of time to figure out what we're going to go with, but we wanted something that wasn't, too agricultural and obviously agricultural, but, something that reflected our history. So we hope that kind of works out for us.
Yeah, from your previous venture to the current one, all your experience remains the same. We're just referring to you as episode 3 from now on, but we have many episodes of chatting with you about livestock here on Flow, and looking at the markets this week, some of the major observations, we do have some general, at least upward or steady activity for sheep and for cattle.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and I mean the big thing for the week just gone was the export numbers came out for red meat exports. So we saw a bit of a decline back in September, down 23%. And that was off, if you remember back August, we saw that really good numbers for August because of the change to the South Korean tariff regime. But through September, we've had a combination of a bit of wet weather, hampering kind of processing. And so that some of that constraints took its toll, I think, on volumes. And those numbers have kind of dropped a bit. Although in the lamb space, that's kind of remained reasonably strong. They still eased over September, but there's still those very strong levels because of that demand out of the US, still pretty robust.
Now, putting you on the spot here a bit, that Korea one you're mentioning, tariff reductions, how long ago was the trade deal done to make that happen?
The Korean one, I think it was about a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago, in terms of that. We're in a stage now where our tariffs are slowly reducing. The Americans got there ahead of us, so their reductions are going a bit quicker than ours. I think it's something like later to the decade when we go to completely no tariffs for beef.
Yeah, I guess that's good to see, though, good to highlight that some way down the track you do start to see the export numbers lift off the back of the tariff reductions, with a little bit of agitation from a federal opposition about the UK and India trade deals. We might kick over to another year of finally sealing those, running out of time in federal parliament. What's on the export front generally, with some other data maybe from the US that we've got to share with the listeners as well?
When you're talking beef flows to the US, they're still pretty slow and low. They're running about 50% below their normal levels. But if you remember that in the US, they're going through the third year of their liquidation of their beef herd. So domestic production there is quite high. And up until just recently, the Australian pricing of beef was above the US. So if you think back to 2021, the Australian pricing was about 15% above the US in terms of beef pricing for heavy steers. And that's now, in this year now, we've actually seen that drift down because, the US are producing, a lot more, and that's kind of weighing on their price. And so at the moment, the Australian heavy steer is about 7% discount to the US, and that's about normal for this time of the year now. We usually run about a 12% discount. So that means that, and the Aussie dollar coming off too has been a great help to our exports, just in terms of competitiveness. It hasn't flowed through to the September figures, but I think as we go through to the rest of the year, we could start to see a little bit of pickup in volumes. Yeah,
speaking of things that have come around this time of year, the spring flush in the middle of spring when it comes to lambs, we're seeing that price climb up steadily from that panic dip we had off the back of foot and mouth concerns. We're sitting around $7.65. How much is processing helping with that pricing?
Yeah, certainly. From a lamb perspective, there was a bit of a backlog when we had those FMD concerns, and the pricing reacted quite poorly, and that was right in the thick of processing capacity constraints. Processors were operating about 60% back in the middle of the year. I have been told by a few of the processors now they're closer to kind of 75-80% in terms of capacity, so they have been able to lift some of that, and that's come at a good time, because as we're leading into this spring flush period, we are seeing slightly higher volumes coming from Victoria. That's not the beginnings of the spring flush, but which really kind of, later October into mid-November is when the big numbers come. And so it's good to see that, they are getting that capacity up to be able to handle those big numbers. And that's probably why the price has been able to hold up. But I suspect as we head, more into November, we are probably going to see a little bit of price pressure on the trade lamb just because of those volumes.
All right. Well, if people want to get the latest from yourself and Andrew Whitelaw at episode 3, what's the website they can plug into?
It's episode3.net, and it's 3 as the number 3.
All right, Matt Dalgleish, thank you very much for joining us today on the latest on the cattle and sheep markets. Have yourself a great weekend.
Cheers, Ricky. Take care.